Leo Callahan shoved open the door with his shoulder. Maya pressed tight against his chest, her little fingers digging into his shirt, and froze. It wasn't the men's restroom. A woman spun around, eyes wide, wrapped in nothing but a beach towel. For 3 full seconds, nobody breathed. Then she smiled. Not a scream. Not outrage. A smile calm, almost like she'd been expecting him. "Let me help you," she said. And that was the moment Leo Callahan's carefully locked-down life cracked wide open. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter. The alarm didn't wake Leo up on Saturday morning. He'd never actually fallen asleep. He'd been lying on his back since 2 a.m. staring at the water stain on the bedroom ceiling that he kept promising himself he'd paint over and never did, with his phone balanced on his chest screen. Glowing emails arriving in clusters like bad news always does. The Hargrove project, the permit delays. A message from his boss, Dennis Vance, sent at 11:47 p.m. on a Friday that read simply, "We need to talk Monday, don't be late." 4 words, 14 letters. And just like that, the weekend was already ruined before it started. He heard Maya before he saw her, the soft padding of bare feet on hardwood, then the unmistakable sound of a 5-year-old who had absolutely zero interest in the concept of sleeping in. "Daddy?" He didn't move. "Daddy?" The mattress dipped. A small, warm weight climbed onto his stomach. "Daddy, are you dead?" Leo opened one eye. Maya was 6 inches from his face, her dark curls wild from sleep. Her eyes, her mother's eyes, that exact shade of brown that still hit him like a fist to the chest, some mornings wide and completely serious. "Not yet," he said. She patted his cheek with a sticky hand. He didn't want to know why it was sticky. "Good. Because you promised the beach." He had promised the beach. He'd promised it 2 weeks ago when he was desperate to redirect her away from a meltdown in the grocery store. He'd promised it last Tuesday when she brought it up at dinner. He'd promised it again on Thursday when she'd drawn a picture of the 2 of them in the sand and taped it to his laptop screen. He was out of delays. "Give me 20 minutes, he said. Maya looked at him with the expression of a woman who had heard every excuse a man could make. 10, she said. He compromised at 15, which really meant 32 by the time he'd packed the bag, found the sunscreen that wasn't expired, located Maya's missing sandal under the couch, answered one quick email. Just one, he'd told himself, and then another, and then stood in the kitchen eating cold toast over the sink, while Maya sat by the front door with her arms crossed and her sunglasses already on, radiating 5-year-old disappointment like a tiny adorable sun. The drive to Pelican Cove took 40 minutes on a good Saturday. It took 55 that morning because Leo missed the exit while reading a text at a red light from Dennis, of course a follow-up to the "We need to talk" message that said, "Bring the revised Hargrove schematics." All of them meant 14 files. On a Saturday, at the beach. Leo set the phone face down on the passenger seat. It buzzed again immediately. He turned up the radio. Maya was singing something in the back seat, a song he didn't recognize, something she'd learned from her preschool teacher, Miss Patton, who apparently communicated entirely through folk music and finger puppets. The melody was off-key and relentless, and somehow the most calming thing Leo had heard all week. He exhaled. Okay, he thought. One day. 8 hours. The emails can wait. His phone buzzed 4 more times before they pulled into the parking lot. Pelican Cove, on a late June Saturday, looked exactly the way Leo remembered hating it. Packed, loud smelling of sunscreen and funnel cake families sprawled across every visible inch of sand like a human patchwork quilt. Children ran in every direction. Seagulls circled overhead with the aggressive confidence of birds who knew nobody was going to stop them. A man near the water was playing terrible guitar. Nobody had asked him to. Nobody was stopping him either. Leo stood at the edge of the parking lot, with the beach bag cutting into his shoulder, Maya's hand in his, and felt the particular kind of loneliness that only comes when you're surrounded by people who all seem to know exactly what they're doing. A couple walked past him, late 30s, laughing about something, the man carrying a toddler on his shoulders. The woman with her hand looped through his arm. They moved like a unit, like a team. Leo looked away. "Daddy, you're squeezing," Maya said. He loosened his grip. "Sorry, Bug. Can we go to the water? We need to set up first." "Can we set up at the water?" "That's not how setting up works." Maya considered this philosophical position for approximately 2 seconds before pulling him forward anyway. They found a spot, or rather Maya found a spot, because she had opinions about sand real estate that Leo had learned not to argue with about 40 yards from the shoreline between a family with a sprawling pop-up canopy and a cluster of college kids with a Bluetooth speaker playing something with too much bass. Leo spread the blanket. He applied sunscreen to Maya's face while she tried to evade him with the full-body commitment of a professional wrestler. He inflated the small pool ring he'd remembered to pack at the last second. He set up the umbrella. He did all of it with the mechanical competence of a man who had learned over 2 years of solo parenting that competence was the thing standing between him and complete collapse. His phone buzzed. He flipped it face down in the bag. "Daddy, come to the water." Maya was already 4 feet away, sandals abandoned, heading for the shoreline with absolute conviction. "Stay where I can see you," he called after her. She waved a hand over her shoulder. Not a yes, Daddy wave. More of a noted, but irrelevant wave. Leo sat down on the blanket. He lasted 45 seconds before he unzipped the bag and pulled out his phone. 17 new emails. 3 texts from Dennis. One from his sister Claire in Portland that read, "How's my favorite nervous wreck doing?" with a string of emoji he was too tired to decode. He typed back fine. She replied instantly. "That's what you said when you had pneumonia and still went to work." He put the phone back in the bag. By noon, Maya had built something in the sand that she described as a castle for seahorses, and also one regular horse who was visiting had eaten half a peanut butter sandwich and refused the other half on the grounds that it was too square, had collected 11 rocks that she declared were definitely magic, and had waded into the water exactly 3 times, with Leo hovering 2 steps behind her like an anxious shadow. He was getting better at this, he told himself. At being present. At putting the phone away. At watching her laugh when a wave hit her knees and her whole face lit up like something had been plugged back in. He was getting better. He was almost relaxed. That was when Maya grabbed his hand and said very seriously, "Daddy, emergency." Leo looked down at her. Her face had shifted that particular expression she made when something was urgent, and she was trying very hard to be mature about it. "What kind of emergency?" "The bathroom kind," she said, "right now." The beach restrooms at Pelican Cove were located at the far end of the main stretch past the concession stand, past the outdoor shower stations, past a sign that someone had vandalized, so the arrow pointed in 3 different directions at once. Leo had Maya's hand and the beach bag over his shoulder because he refused to leave it unattended, a habit formed after losing an expensive work tablet at a conference 2 years ago, and they were moving fast. "Can you hold it?" "Daddy, 2 minutes." "Daddy, no." He picked up the pace. The restroom building was a low concrete structure set back from the main path, partially obscured by a row of wind-bent palms. The entrance split into 2 corridors, men's on the right, women's on the left, separated by a bulletin board covered in sun-faded flyers about surf lessons and lost dogs. Leo pushed through the door on the right. He registered 3 things simultaneously. The room was small. It had a single changing bench and a curtained area, and the woman standing 4 feet in front of him holding a beach towel to her chest with both hands was very clearly not expecting company. She had dark red hair pulled back in a loose knot. She was mid-30s maybe, with the kind of face that was impossible to read in a moment of shock, not angry, not horrified, just startled, present. Like a person who was actually there in a way Leo couldn't quite explain. Maya pressed against his leg, said with perfect 5-year-old clarity, "That's the wrong bathroom." Leo opened his mouth. Nothing came out. The woman looked at him. Then she looked down at Maya. Then she looked back at him, and she smiled. Not the polite, tight-lipped smile of someone managing embarrassment. A real one. A slightly amused, fully human, "I see exactly what just happened" smile. "I think," She said, her voice calm in a way that made Leo's ears ring slightly, that the ladies' room is next door. Yes, I know that. He gestured vaguely at Maya at the door, at the entire catastrophic sequence of events that had led him here. Emergency, the woman said. Emergency, Maya confirmed solemnly. The woman looked at Maya for a moment. Then she did something Leo had not expected, had not planned for, had absolutely no framework to process. She crouched down to Maya's level, looked her in the eye and said, "Come on, sweetie. I've got you. The stall at the end has the best lock." Then she looked up at Leo. "I'll take her. You wait outside. It's fine." He stared at her. "I'm a mom," she said, simply answering the question he hadn't asked. "2 boys. I've handled every kind of emergency there is." And before Leo Callahan, architect, widower, single father man, who had been in complete and total control of every situation for the past 2 years, could form a single coherent response, his daughter took the hand of a complete stranger and walked toward the stall at the end of the row without looking back. He stood outside the door in the shade of the palm trees with the beach bag on his shoulder and the sun hitting the back of his neck, and he didn't know what to do with his hands. He couldn't remember the last time he hadn't known what to do with his hands. He pulled out his phone out of reflex. 17 emails. Dennis again. He locked the screen without reading anything and put it back in his pocket. A minute passed, maybe 2. He thought about how he would explain this to Claire, who called every Sunday and asked if he was meeting people. He thought about the word meeting and how it implied a kind of easy social exchange that had stopped feeling natural to him somewhere around the time he'd gotten very good at doing everything alone. He thought about the way his wife Rachel used to say that he weaponized competence to avoid being vulnerable, how she'd say it without cruelty, just as simple observation, the way she noticed everything. He thought about Rachel's voice for 1 second. Exactly 1. Then he did what he always did, and folded it back away somewhere behind his sternum, where he kept things that were too heavy to carry in his hands. The door opened. Maya came out first, walking with the relaxed satisfaction of a person who had handled her business. The woman followed, and for the first time, Leo got a full look at her. In the light, she'd wrapped the towel around herself properly. Her hair was still wind-loose, and she looked completely unrattled, in a way that made him slightly irrationally annoyed and deeply grateful at the same time. She was great, the woman said. Total pro. I'm always a pro, Maya said. You really are. The woman held out her hand to Leo with the easy straightforwardness of someone who had no patience for awkward silences. Clara Hess. He shook it. Leo Callahan. And I owe you, I don't even know. An apology, definitely. Probably more than that. You owe me nothing. It happens. I walked into the wrong bathroom. You were in crisis, Clara said. I've done worse under less pressure. She glanced down at Maya, who was now examining one of the rocks she'd been carrying in her pocket. How old? 5.5, Maya said without looking up. The half matters. Clara laughed, a real one, quick and unguarded. My son Julian would like you. He's 6 and extremely serious about halves. Where is he? Maya asked, suddenly interested. At the water with my sister. Building something, probably. He's very into construction. Maya looked up. I'm building a castle. For seahorses. He would love that, Clara said. She glanced at Leo. Something passed across her face. Not pity, nothing that soft. More like recognition. Is it just you two today? The question was simple, direct. No performance around it. Yeah, Leo said. Just us. She nodded once, like she understood the sentence behind the sentence. Us too, she said. Well, me and Julian and my sister, but Danny mostly reads and pretends she's not there. She smiled again, and Leo had the dizzying and completely uncharacteristic thought that he would like to keep standing here in the shade talking to this person for a while longer. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He ignored it. You should come build with us, Maya announced, looking up at Clara with the breezy authority of a child who had not yet learned that social interaction was supposed to be complicated. Leo started to say something. Maya, she's probably busy, But Clara was already looking at his daughter with that same unguarded smile. "You know what?" she said. "I think we should." And Leo Callahan, who had spent 2 years learning to need nobody, picked up the beach bag, took his daughter's hand, and walked back out into the sun. He did not check his phone. Not for another 2 hours. It was the longest he'd gone in 14 months. The sand was still warm under Leo's feet when he realized he had no idea how to do this. Not the walking. Not the carrying of the bag. Not even the keeping Maya in sight part, which he'd gotten disturbingly good at over the past 2 years, that particular low-grade vigilance that single parents develop like a sixth sense. He knew how to do all of that. What he didn't know how to do was this, walking beside a woman he'd met 12 minutes ago under genuinely catastrophic circumstances, while his daughter held that woman's hand like they'd known each other for years, chattering about the structural requirements of a seahorse castle with the focused intensity of a small engineer. Clara was listening. Actually listening, not the half-present nod and smile that Leo recognized from work meetings and neighborhood small talk, but the kind of listening where she asked follow-up questions. Real ones. "Do seahorses need a moat?" Clara asked. Maya considered this with enormous seriousness. "Probably not. They already live in water, but maybe for decoration. Decorative moat. I respect that." "Julian will understand," Maya said with the confidence of someone who had already decided Julian was going to be her new best friend and was simply waiting for him to catch up. Leo shifted the bag on his shoulder and told himself he was fine. He was fine. This was fine. A stranger was holding his daughter's hand on a public beach in broad daylight, and he was fine. He was not fine. He was acutely aware that he had sand on his left elbow from where he'd been sitting that he hadn't shaved since Thursday, and that the t-shirt he'd grabbed off the floor that morning had a small bleach stain near the hem that he'd been meaning to throw out for 6 months. He was also aware that Clara Hess had not once looked at him like any of that mattered, which somehow made it worse. "So architecture," Clara said. He looked at her. "What? You have a drafting pencil clipped to your bag, and you were doing math in your head when we were walking, I could tell by your face." "I wasn't." He stopped. He had been. Load-bearing calculations for the Hargrove project running automatically in the background of his brain like a program he couldn't close. "That's a very specific observation. I'm an occupational therapist," she said. "I read people for a living, hazard of the trade." She glanced at him sideways, something light in her expression. "You were somewhere else for most of that walk." "I'm here now," he said. "I know," she said. "That's why I mentioned it." He didn't know what to do with that either. Julian was exactly where Clara had said he'd be, at the water's edge, crouched over something in the wet sand with the focused absorption of a scientist conducting critical research. He was a compact, serious-faced kid, with Clara's dark red hair, cut short, and a pair of swim goggles pushed up on his forehead like a tiny, eccentric professor. Beside him, sprawled on a beach chair with a paperback and enormous sunglasses, was a woman who had to be Clara's sister, same bone structure, same mouth, but with the energy of someone who had claimed this chair 3 hours ago and had no intention of leaving it. "Danny," Clara said. Danny lowered her book approximately 2 inches. "You were gone a while." Slight detour. Danny lowered the book the rest of the way. She looked at Leo, then at Maya, then back at Clara with the expression of a woman who had approximately 400 questions and was choosing strategically to ask none of them right now. "Danny, this is Leo and Maya. Leo, my sister Danny." "Hi," Leo said. "Hi," Danny said in the tone of someone filing information away. Maya had already moved past all of them and was standing over Julian, examining his project with professional interest. Julian looked up at her. A beat passed. "What are you building?" Maya asked. "A harbor," Julian said. "For what ships?" "I'm building a castle. For seahorses. And 1 visiting horse." Julian considered this. "Seahorses can't live in a castle." It's a special castle. Another beat. Julian looked back at his harbor. Then he shifted sideways, making room. You can help if you want, he said. The south wall keeps collapsing. Maya sat down beside him without another word. Leo watched his daughter, who had refused to share her crayons with the neighbor's kid last week on the grounds that they were her specific crayons, immediately pick up a handful of sand and begin reinforcing Julian's south wall, and felt something loosen slightly in the center of his chest. That took about 11 seconds, Clara said quietly beside him. Maya doesn't usually... He stopped. She's not usually that easy with new people. Neither is Julian. Clara was watching them the same way he was. He's been through a lot this year. New school, new neighborhood. He doesn't trust easy. What happened? Leo asked. Then immediately. Sorry, you don't have to. Divorce, she said simply. No drama in it. Just the word clean and flat, like something she'd practiced saying without flinching. Finalized 8 months ago. Julian took it hard. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was the right call. She sat down on the edge of the blanket and tucked her knees to her chest. Some things just run their course. Leo sat down beside her, leaving what he considered a polite and reasonable amount of space between them, and watched Maya and Julian argue cheerfully about the optimal angle for a harbor wall. Your wife? Clara asked. Not prying, just asking. 2 years ago, he said. Cancer. It was fast. God! She said it quietly, not as an exclamation, as something real. I'm sorry, Leo. Don't be, he said, and then heard himself echoing her words back and almost smiled. Almost. Fair, she said, and she didn't push past it. Didn't fill the space with the reflexive condolences he'd learned to brace for the she's in a better place, and the at least you have Maya, and the you're so strong that people offered like they were handing him something useful. Clara just let the silence sit there, and it was unexpectedly the most comfortable silence Leo had occupied in months. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Dennis again, this time a call, not a text. He watched the screen, watched Dennis's name pulse with the reliable urgency of a man who did not believe in weekends. He declined the call. He felt Clara notice, but she didn't say anything. He calls on Saturdays, Leo said, because apparently the silence had become comfortable enough that he was now volunteering information. My boss, we have a project in trouble, and he thinks the solution to that is more communication. Is it? No, the solution is better load calculations and a contractor who shows up on time, but that's harder to do from a beach chair. Clara smiled. What kind of architecture? Commercial mostly, some residential. Right now, a mixed-use development downtown that's 6 weeks behind and over budget, which is apparently my fault, despite the fact that I designed the building, not the supply chain. Ouch. It's fine. You said that the way my dad says he's fine right before he takes an antacid. Leo looked at her. She was watching him with that same level unapologetic attention, and something about it made him want to either look away completely or say something true. He wasn't used to those being his only two options. It's not fine, he said. It's a disaster. I might be getting reassigned, or worse, and I'm sitting on a beach because I promised my daughter, and I can't. I can't keep not keeping promises to her even when everything else is... He stopped, pressed his hand flat against his knee. Sorry. You didn't ask for that. I did actually, Clara said. I asked if it was fine. Right. He exhaled. Then no, it's not fine. Better, she said, and meant it. Danny brought food at some point, a cardboard tray of fries from the concession stand, which she distributed with the efficiency of someone who'd been feeding children and their adjacent adults for years. Maya ate fries with Julian in complete focused silence, their earlier architectural debate apparently tabled in favor of more pressing caloric needs. Danny sat back down in her chair, reopened her book, and resumed her policy of polite non-involvement, which Leo was increasingly certain was a performance. He'd caught her watching him twice with the particular evaluative attention of a protective sibling doing risk assessment. He respected it. "She likes you," Clara said, following his gaze. "She's trying to figure out if I'm a threat." "That's how she shows she likes you. If she didn't, she'd have already mentioned something about having friends in law enforcement." "Does she have friends in law enforcement?" "No," Clara said. "But she says it very convincingly." Leo ate a fry. Then he said, without quite planning to, "When did it stop feeling weird?" Clara looked at him. "What?" "Being out. Like this. With people." He gestured vaguely at the beach, at the families, at the general concept of a social Saturday. "I spent a lot of time after Rachel died just not going anywhere that felt like it was supposed to be for two people. Avoiding places. Events. The beach was on the list." "What changed today?" "Maya drew a picture of us here and taped it to my laptop." Clara's face did something complicated and lovely. "How long has the picture been there?" 9 days. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "It stopped being weird for me when I stopped expecting it to not be weird and just went anyway. Like I'd show up somewhere and I'd feel completely out of place and I'd think, okay, I feel out of place, but I'm still here. And eventually being there stopped feeling like it required the same amount of effort." "How long does that take?" "Different for everyone. Longer if you're the kind of person who's really good at managing everything alone." He looked at her. "Is that what I look like?" "A little bit, yeah." She said it without apology. "You've got this whole system. The bag is packed perfectly. The sunscreen was applied in a specific order. You know exactly where Maya is every second. You've got it handled." She paused. "But you're also exhausted in a way that has nothing to do with not sleeping." The accuracy of it was disarming enough that Leo had no immediate response. He looked out at the water at Maya and Julian, who had abandoned the fries, and returned to their construction project, their two small heads bent together over the sand. "Rachel used to say I weaponized competence," he said finally. "Smart woman. She was the smartest person I ever met." He said it without grief exactly, or rather with the particular grief that has calcified into something you can hold without cutting yourself on it. "She would have been better at this than me. At all of it. She had this ability to just walk into a room full of strangers and make everyone feel like she'd known them forever. And you walk into rooms and assess the exits." He almost laughed. Actual surprise in it. "That's accurate. You walked into the wrong bathroom and even in a full panic, your first instinct was to calculate the fastest route out that caused the least damage." "I was protecting Maya." "You were protecting Maya." Clara agreed. "But also yourself." She wasn't saying it cruelly, she was just saying it. "That's not a criticism, that's just, I recognize it." Leo looked at her. "From yourself. From the version of me that existed for about a year after Marcus and I separated. I got very efficient." She smiled, but it had a rueful edge. "Very capable. I could handle anything. I didn't need anyone to handle it with me. I had systems." She looked at her son. "Julian broke the systems, not on purpose. He just needed things from me that my systems couldn't produce." "Like what?" "Like being a person." She shrugged one shoulder. "Being present. Letting him see me not know what I was doing sometimes." She paused. "Kids don't need a perfect parent. They need a real one." Leo absorbed that. "Maya still sleeps with the light on," he said after a moment. "She's been doing it since Rachel died. I keep thinking I should, I don't know, work on it, figure out some system to help her feel safer without the light. But whenever I go in to check on her and she's asleep with the little lamp going, I just—" He stopped. "You leave it on," Clara said. "I leave it on." "That's not a failure of the system," Clara said quietly. "That's you being a real one." Something happened in Leo's chest that he was not prepared for. Not sharp, not overwhelming, more like a pressure releasing very slowly, the way a room sounds different once you've opened a window you'd forgotten was stuck. He didn't trust himself to respond to that directly. So instead he said, "Julian seems like a good kid." "He's the best thing I've ever done," Clara said without hesitation. And the most terrifying. Agreed, Leo said. On both counts. Below them, Julian and Maya had apparently reached some kind of architectural summit. Julian was pointing at something, explaining. Maya was nodding with the seriousness of a person receiving important technical information. Then Maya said something that made Julian stop, look at her, and smile, a real kid's smile, sudden and unreserved, the kind that makes adults involuntarily smile back. Clara made a small sound beside him, like something released. He doesn't smile like that a lot lately, she said, and her voice was careful in the way people's voices get when they're holding something delicate. How long has he been having a hard time? Since the school switch. He had 2 good friends at his old school. Real ones, the kind you make when you're little, and don't know yet that friendships are supposed to be complicated. She watched Julian. He hasn't made new ones. He comes home, does his work, plays his games, and doesn't talk about missing his old friends because he knows it makes me feel guilty. She paused. 6-year-olds shouldn't know how to manage their parents' emotions. No, Leo said. They shouldn't, but they pick it up anyway. They're watching us all the time. Every face we make, every time we go quiet, they're cataloging it. Maya asks me if I'm sad, Leo said. Not are you okay? She asks if I'm sad. Like she already knows the binary options and she's just checking which one. What do you tell her? I tell her sometimes, and that it's okay to be sometimes. He looked at his daughter. She told me once that sad is just love that doesn't have anywhere to go yet. I don't know where she heard that. I wrote it down. Clara turned to look at him. Something in her expression shifted. Not pity, not sympathy, but something more like recognition, so sharp it had a physical quality. That's the truest thing I've heard in a long time, she said. Leo held her gaze for a moment longer than he'd intended. Then he looked away back at the water and rubbed the back of his neck and told himself the warmth he felt had everything to do with the sun. His phone buzzed again. This time, he didn't even reach for it. Danny behind them turned a page in her book. But Leo had the distinct impression she hadn't been reading for a while. The afternoon rolled forward the way good afternoons do when you stop watching the clock, not quickly, not slowly, but with a kind of weightlessness that Leo hadn't felt in long enough that he'd forgotten it was possible. The kids migrated between the water and their construction projects with the natural rhythm of children who had adopted each other. Danny, eventually abandoning the pretense of her book, joined the construction effort and turned out to be startlingly good at sand engineering, which she explained was because she'd been a civil engineering major for 1 semester before switching to nursing, and Julian received this information with genuine admiration. At some point, Clara bought 2 cups of coffee from the concession stand and handed one to Leo without asking how he took it. It was black. He looked at her. You don't seem like a sugar person, she said simply. She was right. He was not a sugar person. He held the paper cup with both hands and drank the mediocre beach stand coffee and thought that it tasted for reasons he couldn't entirely explain, like something he'd needed for a long time. Thank you, he said. It's just coffee. I know, he said. I know. The coffee was gone by the time Maya came running back up the sand with wet feet, and a request that Leo recognized as non-negotiable before she'd finished saying it. Daddy Julian says there's a tide pool on the other side of the rocks, and can we go look because he says there might be actual crabs, and I need to see if there are crabs. You need to, Leo said. I need to, Maya confirmed. For science. Julian appeared behind her, slightly more reserved in his delivery, but with the same essential urgency in his eyes. He looked at his mother. Ms. Danny said she'd come. Danny was already standing up, brushing sand off her shorts, with the decisiveness of a woman who had been waiting for a reason to move. I'll take them, she said to Clara. You two stay. She said it completely casually, like she was suggesting nothing at all, and Leo noticed she didn't look at him when she said it. Clara said, Danny. It's a tide pool, Danny said. 20 minutes. I have my phone. She looked at Julian. Shoes. Both of you. Within 90 seconds, Danny was walking down the beach with 2 children, a bucket Maya had produced from somewhere, and the confident energy of a woman who had absolutely engineered this situation and was not remotely sorry about it. Leo and Clara sat with 6 feet of empty blanket between them and the particular silence of 2 people who have just been very transparently maneuvered into being alone. "She's subtle," Leo said. "She really isn't," Clara said. "But she means well." She wrapped both hands around her knees and looked out at the water. "Sorry if that was—" "It's fine," Leo said, then remembered what she'd said earlier about the word fine. "It's good, actually." Clara looked at him. Something eased in her expression. "Okay." The waves came in. The guitar player from earlier had relocated somewhere down the beach, still terrible blessedly farther away. A kid ran past shrieking with joy about nothing in particular, just the pure animal pleasure of running on sand. And Leo watched him and felt the familiar double-edged thing, the happiness of watching a child be happy, and underneath it, the ache of everything that happiness costs a parent to protect. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure." "When you said you recognized it, the efficiency of the systems, how long did it take before you stopped using them as a wall?" Clara was quiet for a moment. Not evasive, just thinking honestly, which Leo was realizing was how she did most things. "I'm not sure I've completely stopped," she said. "I think I've just gotten better at knowing when I'm doing it." She paused. There was a moment about a year after the separation. Julian had a bad night. He'd had a nightmare, woke up crying, and I went in and held him, and he fell back asleep. And I was sitting there in the dark with him, and I thought, I am so good at handling this. I have the nighttime routine. I have the comfort words. I have the system. And then I thought, but I'm completely alone in this room. Not in a self-pity way, just factually. There was nobody to go back to bed with, nobody to say he okay to, nobody to share the weight of that particular 3 a.m. She pressed her lips together briefly. I cried in his doorway for about 10 minutes, first time I'd cried since the whole thing started. "What stopped you?" Julian rolled over and said in his sleep, "It's okay, Mama." She laughed small and tight. He wasn't even awake, but somehow that did it. "Kids know," Leo said. "They always know." Leo leaned back on his hands and looked up at the sky, very blue, the kind of blue that feels almost aggressive in its clarity. "Maya held my hand at the grocery store last month, not because she was scared of getting lost. She just reached up and took my hand." He paused. "She's 5. She still needs things from me constantly. And somehow she found room in that to take care of me a little too." "That's what Rachel meant," Clara said. "What Maya said. Sad is love that doesn't have anywhere to go yet." She turned to look at him directly. "Maya's not just sad. She's still giving it. To you. That's what that was." Leo didn't answer. He was looking at the water and doing the thing he'd gotten very practiced at, which was keeping his face neutral when something had hit him somewhere structural. But his jaw was tight, and Clara was a woman who read people for a living, so there was probably no point. "You don't have to be okay right now," she said. Not gently exactly, more like matter-of-factly. "I'm always okay," he said. "Leo, it's a reflex," he said. I know it is." He pressed his palm flat against the blanket. "After Rachel died, there were about 3 weeks where I wasn't okay, and everyone knew it, and everyone was there. Her mother, my sister, her friends. And then at some point, very gradually, everyone went back to their lives, and it was just me and a 14-month-old, and the understanding that I didn't get to not be okay anymore, because there was nobody to be not okay to." "That's one of the loneliest things I've ever heard," Clara said. "It wasn't loneliness," Leo said. "I told myself it wasn't. It was just practicality. You have to function, so you function. And now—" He looked at her. "Now I'm sitting on a beach talking to a woman I walked in on in a changing room, so clearly my systems have some gaps." Clara laughed genuinely. The real one, the quick, unguarded sound that Leo had been unconsciously cataloging as the marker of a real moment rather than a polite one. He found himself wanting to earn it again immediately, which was a feeling so foreign he almost didn't recognize it. "For what it's worth," she said. I'm glad you opened the wrong door. You were very calm about it. I was terrified, she said pleasantly. I just have a very good game face. Occupational therapy. Pediatric occupational therapy. I work with kids who have trauma responses, sensory processing issues. Kids who've been through things that would break most adults. You learn very quickly that panic is contagious and calm is a choice. She tilted her head slightly. Also, I could tell immediately you were not a threat. You were a disaster, but not a threat. High praise. I thought so. 22 minutes into their unsubtle alone time, Danny texted, "Found 3 crabs." Julian named one of them. Maya is attempting to have a conversation with it. Will be a while. Clara showed Leo the text. He read it, then looked at her, and she looked at him. And they both started laughing at the same time, not politely, not a little, but the full-body kind of laughing that happens when you're surprised by it when it comes from somewhere genuine, and catches you off guard. She's going to name all 3, Leo said. Julian will object. He'll say crab naming requires a formal process. Then they'll compromise. Clara agreed, still smiling. And for a moment, they were simply 2 people sitting in the afternoon sun, smiling at the small, perfect fact of their children understanding each other. Then Leo's phone rang. Not a text, an actual call. And the name on the screen wasn't Dennis. This time it was a number he didn't recognize with a downtown area code, and beside it, a tiny icon that meant his work voicemail had flagged it as high priority. He stared at it. You can answer it, Clara said. I know. But you're not going to. I don't. He set the phone face down. Not right now. She watched him do it. When did you last take a full day off? Not a day where you didn't go into the office. A day where you actually didn't work. The question was simple enough that the honest answer was embarrassing. I don't remember, he said. Leo. I know. What would happen if you didn't answer every call? The project would still be behind. Dennis would still be furious. The contractor would still be unreliable. He paused. Nothing would actually change in the next 8 hours. So what are you protecting by staying available? He thought about it. Really thought about it, which he didn't usually do, because thinking about it led to answers he didn't especially want. The feeling that I'm handling it, he said finally. If I'm reachable, I'm responsible. If I'm responsible, I'm in control. If I'm in control... He stopped. Nothing can surprise you, Clara finished. Nothing can go wrong without me being there to what? I don't know. Stop it. Fix it. He heard himself. That doesn't make sense. It makes complete sense, she said. It's just not working. He picked up the phone, turned it over, put it back down. Rachel used to say that I treated being needed like a life jacket, he said. That I'd rather be indispensable than vulnerable. She said that, among other things. He almost smiled. She had a vocabulary for my particular brand of dysfunction that was specific. She sounds like she was extraordinary. She was exhausting, Leo said, and then immediately, in the best possible way, she pushed every one of my comfortable walls and made me feel guilty for building them, and she was right every single time, and I spent 11 years married to her still being surprised by that. His voice stayed even. It cost him something to keep it that way. I keep thinking I should have been better at it while she was here, at being pushed, at letting the walls down. You're here, aren't you? Clara said quietly. He looked at her. On a beach, phone face down, talking to someone you just met. She met his eyes steadily. That's not nothing. It took my 5-year-old drawing a picture and taping it to my laptop. Most breakthroughs have an embarrassingly simple trigger, Clara said. The important thing is you got in the car. A wave came in longer and louder than the ones before it, and they both watched it. Leo thought about the drive here, Maya singing in the back seat, the melody off-key and relentless, the way it had been the only calm thing in the car. He thought about declining Dennis's call. He thought about the specific face Clara made when she was listening to something that mattered a slight stillness, like she was giving the words room. "Can I ask you something now?" Clara said. Fair trade. What was she like, Rachel? What was she actually like day to day? Not you don't have to tell me the, no, I... He surprised himself. She made coffee wrong, he said. Every single morning for 11 years. She put the grounds in before the filter, and then she'd have to clean it out and redo it, and she never once remembered to do it the other way. I used to make the coffee first every morning just to avoid watching her clean the filter. He paused. I would give anything to watch her clean that filter right now. Clara didn't say anything for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was careful. Those are the things they don't warn you about. What do you mean? When someone dies or leaves, people are ready to talk about the big things. The milestones. First holidays, anniversaries. Nobody talks about the coffee filter. She looked at him. The absolute, ordinary, mundane things that you don't know you're going to miss until they're gone. What's yours? Leo asked. From the marriage. She thought about it. Marcus used to check that the front door was locked 3 times every night before bed. Every night without fail. I used to find it maddening. Completely irrational, repetitive behavior. She smiled faintly. Now, I check it myself. 3 times. Every night. She paused. I'm not sure if that's grief or habit or some strange form of tribute, but I do it. Maybe all 3, Leo said. Maybe all 3, she agreed. The phone face down between them remained silent. The guitar player down the beach had apparently given up. The waves came in and pulled back with the patient rhythm of something that had been doing this since long before either of them had anything to be sad about. I don't do this, Leo said. Do what? Talk, like this, to anyone. He shook his head slightly. My sister calls every Sunday, and I tell her I'm fine, and she knows I'm not, and I know she knows, and we both just continue. Why? Because opening it up is... He exhaled. When you open a thing up, you have to deal with what's in it. And what's in it? He looked at her with the expression of a man standing at the edge of something deep, measuring the distance to the bottom. I don't actually know, he said. I've been keeping the lid on for 2 years. I'm not sure what's still in there. That's terrifying, Clara said. Yes. And also, the most honest thing you've said today. Also, yes. She held his gaze for a long moment. Not pushing. Not pulling. Just there, steady and present, the way she'd been steady in that changing room when the reasonable response to a stranger walking in on her would have been anything other than calm. Leo thought about that, about what it takes to be the kind of person who reaches for calm instead of defense when the world does something unexpected to them. You're very good at this, he said. At what? Not making people feel like they have to manage how much they say. She tilted her head slightly. I work with kids who've learned to go silent because being loud got them hurt. I learned a long time ago that the most useful thing you can sometimes do is just not close the door. Leo thought about closed doors. About the wrong one he'd opened 3 hours ago by accident. About all the right ones he'd been deliberately walking past for 2 years because dealing with what was behind them seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford. Clara, he said. Yeah. Thank you. For not just the bathroom, for this. She looked at him with that level, direct attention. You don't have to thank me for a Saturday afternoon. I'm not thanking you for the afternoon, he said. I'm thanking you for... He stopped searching for the word. Found it, treating me like a person. Something moved across her face, quick reel gone before he could name it. You're welcome, she said simply. Down the beach, loud and unmistakable, came the sound of Maya's voice rising in outrage. Julian, you cannot name the crab Gerald. That is a terrible name. Followed immediately by Julian's calm, serious response. Gerald is a perfectly good name. And Danny's voice somewhere in the background doing absolutely nothing to intervene and possibly laughing. Leo stood up. Clara stood up beside him. They looked at each other, and then they started walking, and Leo didn't consciously decide to match his pace to hers. But he did, and she matched his, and they walked down the beach toward the sound of their children arguing about a crab named Gerald, with the easy, unhurried stride of two people who had without quite planning to run out of reasons to keep their distance. His phone stayed on the blanket. He didn't notice until they were almost at the rocks. He kept walking. Gerald was by any objective measure an unremarkable crab. He was small, sideways moving, and appeared completely indifferent to the naming ceremony that had been conducted in his honor. Maya was crouched 3 inches from him, with her hands on her knees, delivering what appeared to be a formal welcome address. Julian stood beside her with his arms crossed, the posture of a scientist observing a flawed methodology, but choosing to allow it to continue. Danny was sitting on a flat rock behind them, with her phone out, not reading, Leo realized. Photographing Gerald. Maya was saying seriously, "You live in a very nice pool. The water is clear, and you have 2 rocks and some seaweed. This is good real estate." "She's been talking to him for 4 minutes," Danny said without looking up from her phone. "He seems engaged," Clara said. "He moved his claw?" Julian confirmed. "I think that means he agrees about the real estate." Leo crouched down beside Maya. Gerald regarded him with the flat, ancient indifference of a creature who had seen everything and been impressed by none of it. "You made a friend," Leo said. "He's not my friend yet," Maya said. "We're still in the introduction phase." She looked at Leo with complete seriousness. "You can't rush the introduction phase, Daddy." Leo looked at Clara over Maya's head. Clara pressed her lips together, not quite successfully containing a smile. "She's right," Clara said. "You really can't." They stayed at the tide pool longer than anyone had planned. Julian found a second crab smaller faster, and according to Julian, clearly female, based on reasoning, he explained with such confident specificity that nobody questioned it. Maya named her Geraldine without any debate, and for once, Julian did not object, possibly because he had suggested it first, and Maya had simply been faster. The naming of Geraldine's smaller companion took a full 7 minutes of negotiation before settling on Dave, which everyone agreed was imperfect but functional. Danny photographed all of it. Later, Leo would think about those photographs, that there existed somewhere on Danny's phone pictures of Maya and Julian crouched over a tide pool, faces full of the particular concentrated joy of children who have found something living and small and wonderful, and that he had not been the one to take them. That he'd been standing slightly back watching, and that Clara had been beside him, and that Danny had captured all of it without anyone asking her to. He didn't know yet that he'd ask for those photos, but he would. The sun had shifted by the time they walked back to the blanket, lower, warmer in color. The kind of afternoon light that makes everything look slightly more significant than it probably is. Maya was walking between Julian and Danny, still narrating something at length. Leo and Clara fell into step behind them. And it was easy in a way that Leo noticed precisely because easiness had been in short supply for so long that he'd started to think of it as something that happened to other people. "She's going to crash hard tonight," he said. "Julian, too. He's been running on pure social adrenaline since she showed up." Clara watched her son. "He laughed 4 times at the tide pool. I was counting." "Why were you counting?" She was quiet for a half step. "Because 3 weeks ago he told me he didn't feel like laughing anymore. He didn't say it dramatically. He just said it the way you'd say, 'I don't feel like cereal.' Like it was just a fact about himself." Her voice stayed steady, but Leo heard what was underneath it, the specific controlled terror of a parent watching their child dim. "That's when I called his pediatrician. We've been working on it." "Is he okay?" "He's getting there. He needed connection more than anything. Other kids specifically, someone to build things with." She glanced at Leo. "He hasn't had a day like today in a long time." Leo watched Julian, who was now explaining something to Danny, with his hands animated in a way that looked like a different kid than the careful, contained boy who'd been crouched alone over a harbor when they'd first arrived. "Maya either," Leo said. "Then today was good." "Today was good," he agreed. He meant it in more directions than one, and from the way Clara looked at him briefly, before looking back at the kids, he thought she probably knew that. Back at the blanket, Danny produced a bag of grapes from somewhere that Leo was increasingly certain was a spatial impossibility and distributed them with the authority of a person who had decided that nutrition was happening now, whether anyone asked for it or not. Julian and Maya sat close together, shoulders touching, eating grapes, and conducting what appeared to be a serious private conversation at a volume calibrated specifically so adults couldn't hear it. Leo caught the words "next time" and "bring the other bucket," and decided not to examine the rest. He was putting things back in the beach bag, a process he'd done so many times that his hands did it automatically, every item in its specific pocket. When Danny appeared beside him, crouched down to pick up a stray water bottle, and said very quietly without looking at him, "She hasn't talked to anyone like that in a long time." Leo stopped. Danny kept her eyes on the bag. "I'm not saying that to pressure you. I'm saying it so you know it meant something, today." She handed him the water bottle. "She's good at seeming fine, better than most people, but she's been carrying a lot." "The divorce," Leo said. "The divorce was the beginning. There was more after." Danny finally looked at him, direct, assessing the same look she'd been giving him all day, but with the performance of casualness dropped. "Marcus didn't just leave. He left badly. The kind of leaving that makes a person rebuild their idea of what they deserve from the ground up." Leo held the water bottle and didn't say anything. "She's done the work," Danny continued. "She's in a good place. I'm not telling you she's broken. She's not." She paused. "I'm telling you she's careful now, for good reasons. So if today was if you're planning to—" She stopped herself, shook her head slightly. "I'm doing the thing I told myself I wouldn't do. The protective sibling thing. The protective sibling thing." She almost smiled. "I understand," Leo said. He meant it. "I would do the same thing for my sister." Danny studied him for a moment. Then she nodded once in the way of someone who has said what they came to say and is choosing to trust that it landed correctly. She stood up, tucked the water bottle into the bag herself, and walked back to her chair. Clara came back from returning the rental umbrella to the stand down the beach and found Leo sitting on the blanket with his knees up and a look on his face that she apparently read correctly because she sat down and said, "What did Danny say?" "That you're doing well," Leo said. "That's the diplomatic version." It was delivered diplomatically. "She loves me very aggressively." Clara pulled her hair loose and retied it, a gesture so automatic he could tell she did it 100 times a day. "She worries. I've given her reasons to." She said Marcus left badly. Clara went still for just a moment. Then she exhaled. "She shouldn't have." "She was protecting you. I get it." Leo looked at her. "You don't have to explain anything. I know I don't." She looked at her hands. "But I've been thinking about what you said. About keeping the lid on. And I'm sitting here realizing I do the same thing, just with different vocabulary." She paused. "I talk about the divorce like it was mutual and measured and adult. And it was technically, on paper, in front of Julian." She looked up. "But he had an affair, Marcus, for about 14 months, with someone I knew." She said it flat and clean, no performance of casual, just the words. "And when I found out, I spent about a week being completely destroyed, and then I decided that I was not going to let that define me, and I put the lid on, and I have been extremely high-functioning ever since." Leo absorbed this. "Clara, I'm not telling you so you'll feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because you told me something true today, and it seems fair." She met his eyes. "And because I'm sitting here thinking that I've gotten so good at moving forward that sometimes I skip the part where I'm actually allowed to be angry." "Are you angry?" "Some days." She held his gaze without flinching. "Some days I'm furious, and then I feel guilty for being furious because Julian doesn't need a furious mother, he needs a stable one, so I put the lid on, again." She made a small rueful sound. "We're very similar, you and I. Different lids, same instinct." "Competence as armor," Leo said. "Competence as armor." She nodded. My therapist would be very pleased that I just said that out loud to a stranger. Am I still a stranger? She looked at him, a real look, the kind that takes inventory. No, she said. I don't think you are. The word stranger had lost its accuracy somewhere between Gerald the crab and the coffee. Leo wasn't sure exactly when. He suspected it had something to do with the way the afternoon had unfolded, not despite the awkwardness of how it started, but because of it, because walking into the wrong place with your guard completely down strips away the social scaffolding that usually takes weeks to dismantle, and they'd had none of it from the beginning. They'd started somewhere raw and built from there. Can I ask you something? Leo said. About Marcus. Maybe. Did you see it coming? She was quiet for long enough that he thought she might not answer. Then, I saw something. A distance. A change in how he came home at the end of the day. But I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid. She pressed her mouth into a thin line. I'm an occupational therapist. I read people for a living. And I missed it completely because I was too close and too invested in the story I already believed about my life. That's not a failure of reading people, Leo said. That's what love does. It fills in the spaces with what you want to see. Clara looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before, something more unguarded than she'd allowed all day. That's... She stopped. That's a very kind way to say it. It's also true. Yeah. She nodded slowly. It is. Julian's voice carried over from where the kids were sitting. Maya, you can't take Gerald home. He lives here. I wasn't going to take him. I was going to visit. You can't visit a tide pool, Maya. It doesn't work like that. I'll figure it out, Maya said, with the absolute confidence of someone who had never encountered a logistics problem she couldn't eventually solve. Leo called over, Maya, Gerald stays here. Daddy, I know, I was just saying. Clara said beside him, low enough that only he could hear, she negotiates like a litigator. She got it from her mother, Leo said, and for once the sentence came out without the reflexive tightening in his chest. Just a fact. A good one. He noticed the difference. Clara noticed him notice it. He could tell by the way she didn't say anything, just let it sit there clean. The light kept shifting. It did what late afternoon light does in June, turned golden and slightly unreal, the kind of light that makes everything it touches look like a memory of itself. Leo was aware of it the way you're aware of a song ending. The day had a finite quality now, an hourglass quality, and he felt it pressing gently on the afternoon. What are you doing this week? He heard himself say. Clara looked at him. Work. Julian's therapy appointment on Wednesday. Grocery store probably twice because I always forget something. She tilted her head. Why? I don't know, he said, which was honest. I was just... He stopped. Started again. I'm bad at this. At what? At the next step. Of a conversation. Of a... He made a gesture that communicated approximately nothing, which was exactly how he felt. I used to know how to do this, when I was in my 20s. You meet someone, you talk, you figure out if you want to keep talking. And then, I was married for 11 years, and then I wasn't, and now the whole machinery of it feels like something I'd have to learn from scratch. You're doing fine, Clara said. You told me earlier that saying fine was, I know what I said. She was smiling. In this case, I mean it literally. You're doing fine, right now, this conversation. She looked at him steadily. You don't have to figure out the next step at the end of the first day. That's the system talking. The need to have a plan. What's the non-system version? The non-system version is just this was a good day. We had a good day. She paused. And maybe at the end of a good day, you say that and you mean it, and you see what happens next. Leo looked at her. The afternoon light was doing something to the color of her hair that he was aware of being aware of, which was already more than he'd been prepared to feel today. He thought about Rachel briefly, not with guilt, but with something more like acknowledgement. The understanding that loving someone doesn't have an expiration and also doesn't have to be a wall. Rachel would have said something extremely specific about this moment that would have been accurate and slightly mortifying and completely right. He was almost certain she would have approved of the crab named Gerald. "This was a good day," he said. "It was. I haven't had one in a while." "I know," Clara said it softly. "I could tell when you got here." "Was it the bleach stain on the shirt?" "It was the way you carried the bag," she said. "Like it weighed more than it did." He looked down at the bag beside him. Thought about the 14 months of carrying things, the emails and the projects and the grief that had gotten heavy enough to feel like weather, like something the atmosphere was just made of now. "It's lighter," he said, and was almost surprised to find he meant it. Danny announced at some point that felt both too soon and exactly right that she was taking Julian to rinse off at the showers, and then they needed to start heading back, because Julian had a Sunday morning commitment that she didn't elaborate on, and Julian explained was a very important thing with Grandma, in a tone suggesting all things with Grandma were very important things. Maya accepted this information with the gravity it deserved. She and Julian stood facing each other on the sand, with the solemnity of two diplomats closing a summit. "Gerald will still be here," Julian said. "I know. I'll visit him." "You can't visit a tide pool." "Watch me," Maya said serenely. Julian looked at her for a moment with the expression of a person who had met someone genuinely unpredictable for the first time and wasn't sure yet whether he found it alarming or fascinating. Then he stuck out his hand. Maya shook it. Leo watched this and felt something happen in the specific region of his chest where he kept the things that were too big to say. Danny picked up Julian's bag with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had been doing this for years, then stopped in front of Leo and extended her hand. He shook it. "Good to meet you, Leo," she said. "You too, Danny." She held his hand a beat longer than a standard handshake, long enough to be intentional. Then she let go and nodded and walked toward the showers with Julian, who turned back twice to wave at Maya, who waved back both times with total commitment. And then it was just the two of them standing in the early evening light, and Maya between them and the day having arrived at the place it was always going to arrive at. Clara picked up her bag. Leo picked up his. They stood for a moment in the particular suspension of an ending that nobody wants to formally begin. "So," Clara said. "So," Leo said. Maya looked up at both of them with the patient, slightly exasperated expression of a 5-year-old who understood exactly what was happening and could not believe how long it was taking. Clara reached into her bag, took out her phone, looked at him. "I'm going to give you my number," she said. "And I want you to know that I'm not doing that because of any kind of expectation. I'm doing it because today was—" She paused, choosing carefully. "Because today reminded me that good things still happen, and I'd like Julian to see Maya again. And I think—" She stopped, smiled the real one. "I think you might be a person worth knowing, Leo Callahan." Leo took out his phone. His hands were steady in the way hands are when you've finally stopped bracing for the impact. "I think the same about you," he said. They exchanged numbers, the old-fashioned way she read hers aloud. He typed it in. He read his back to her. She saved it. And it was so simple and so small, and it felt to Leo like opening a window in a room he'd been sitting in for 2 years with all the air going stale. Maya put her hand in his when it was done. He looked down at her. She looked up at him with her mother's eyes and her own particular expression of knowing everything and choosing to let him figure it out himself. "Good day, Daddy," she said. He squeezed her hand. "Yeah, Bug," he said. "Real good day." The drive home was quiet in the way that feels full rather than empty. Maya fell asleep, 12 minutes out of the parking lot. Leo watched it happen in the rearview mirror. The way her head tipped sideways by degrees, the way her hand loosened around the rock she'd been holding, one of the 11 she'd declared definitely magic. The rock stayed in her palm, even in sleep. He didn't reach back to take it from her. He drove with the radio off. The evening light came through the windshield at a low angle, painting the dashboard gold, and Leo kept both hands on the wheel and let the day settle around him, the way sediment settles in water once you stop stirring it. His phone was in the cup holder. Face up for once. Clara Hess was in his contacts. He'd typed her name in full first and last the way you do when you want something to feel real and permanent rather than tentative. He hadn't texted yet. He wasn't sure what the right amount of time was. He wasn't sure there was a right amount of time, and he was aware that the fact he was calculating it meant the system was already running again, already trying to find the optimal move, already treating a human connection like a project with deliverables. He left the phone in the cup holder and watched the road. He carried Maya inside without waking her, which was a feat he'd perfected over years. The specific angle of lifting, the way you keep your movements slow and continuous, the trick of getting the door open without shifting her weight. She didn't stir. She smelled like sunscreen and salt water, and the particular warmth of a child who has spent a full day outdoors, and Leo stood in her doorway for a moment after laying her down the small lamp, already glowing on her nightstand, and watched her breathe. The magic rock was still in her hand. He left it there. He left the light on. He went to the kitchen and stood at the counter and looked at the coffee maker. The one he'd bought after Rachel died, a simple drip machine with no complexity to it, because the espresso maker they'd had before required a process he couldn't face alone. He thought about Rachel putting the grounds in before the filter. He thought about the 14 months of making coffee correctly and alone. He thought about mediocre beach stand coffee in a paper cup handed to him without asking how he took it black, because she'd read him right. He made coffee. Correctly. By himself. Then he sat at the kitchen table and looked at his phone. 19 emails. 7 texts from Dennis, the last of which had arrived at 6:43 p.m. and read Leo. Call me tonight. This is not optional. Leo read it twice. Then he put the phone down and drank his coffee. He thought about what Clara had said. Nothing would actually change in the next 8 hours. He thought about how true that was, and how long it had taken someone to say it to him out loud, and how strange it was that the person who'd finally said it was a woman he'd met by walking into the wrong bathroom at Pelican Cove on a Saturday afternoon. He picked up the phone, opened Dennis's texts, stared at them for a long moment. Then he typed, "Got your messages. I'll call Monday morning, 8 sharp." He sent it before he could revise it. Dennis's response came in 4 minutes. "This is important, Leo." Leo typed, "I know, Monday at 8. He set the phone down. His heart was beating slightly faster than usual, the low-grade adrenaline of someone who has just done something small that felt large. He waited for the follow-up message, for Dennis to call, for the familiar pressure to cave, to pick up, to be available, to be necessary. The phone stayed quiet. Leo exhaled a long, slow breath that started somewhere deeper than his lungs. He sat with it. The quiet kitchen, the coffee, the faint creak of the house settling, the specific texture of an evening that wasn't being managed, wasn't being optimized, was just happening to him while he sat in it. He wasn't sure how long he sat there. Long enough that the coffee went cool. Long enough that the kitchen got dark and he didn't get up to turn on the light. Then he picked up the phone and he typed a text to Clara. He deleted it. Typed it again. Deleted it again. The third version he actually sent today was the best day I've had in a long time. Thank you for not screaming when I walked in. He watched the screen. The read receipt appeared almost immediately, which meant she was still up, and then the 3 dots appeared, and then screaming would have frightened Maya. I made a tactical decision. He laughed. Alone in his dark kitchen at 9:40 on a Saturday night, he laughed, and it was the same kind as earlier on. The beach, genuine, surprised by itself, coming from somewhere he hadn't been accessing regularly. He typed, "Sound reasoning." She replied, "I'm a reasonable person. Mostly." Then after a pause, Julian asked me in the car if Maya could come to his school's family day next month. He asked very casually. He has been thinking about it since approximately 5 minutes after they met. Leo read that twice. He thought about Julian. Careful, contained Julian, shifting sideways in the sand to make room. About the smile at the tide pool that Clara had been counting. He typed, Maya drew a picture of Gerald on the back of a receipt in the car before she fell asleep. I'll send it to you when I find it. Please send it immediately, Clara wrote. Julian needs this for documentation. He documents crabs. He documents everything. He has a notebook. Leo smiled at his phone in the dark. Maya has 17 notebooks. She uses them for drawings lists and what she calls important observations. What kind of observations? Last week's entry: clouds are just sky pillows. I don't know what to do with that. 3 dots. Then, that's the most accurate description of clouds I've ever heard. Then Leo. He waited. I'm glad you opened the wrong door. He sat with that for a moment. The dark kitchen, the cool coffee, the small lamp glow coming from down the hall. 19 emails he wasn't going to answer tonight. The Hargrove project that would still be 6 weeks behind on Monday. Dennis, who would get his call at 8 sharp and not a minute before. He typed me too. Then good night, Clara. Good night, Leo. He put the phone down, left it face up on the table, got up and turned on the kitchen light, which he almost always forgot to do, and washed his coffee cup, and stood at the sink for a moment looking at the window above it. Dark glass, his own faint reflection looking back at him. He looked tired. He looked like himself. He looked in some way he couldn't precisely name, like a person who had been somewhere today and come back slightly different than he'd left. He dried the cup, put it away, went to check on Maya one more time. She had rolled to her side, the rock still loosely in her hand. The lamp made everything amber and soft. Leo stood in the doorway and looked at his daughter and thought clearly and without the usual accompanying weight. She's going to be okay. We're going to be okay. Not as a prayer, not as a desperate wish, just as a thing that was true. Sunday morning arrived the way Sunday mornings do after a Saturday that mattered slower, fuller, with the sense of something having shifted in the architecture of ordinary time. Leo woke up at 7, which was early for a Sunday, but late for him, and lay in bed for a full 4 minutes not looking at his phone, which was a personal record. When he finally looked, there was a text from his sister Claire sent at 11 p.m. the night before. You never replied to my fine text, still alive. He typed back, more than usual actually. Her response came fast even at 7 a.m., because Claire was constitutionally incapable of sleeping past 6. Okay, who is she? Leo stared at that for a long moment. Then he typed, I'll tell you Sunday call. Her reply was a string of 11 emoji that he was too rested to decode, but whose general emotional register was clear enough. Maya appeared in his doorway at 7:15 with her hair magnificent from sleep and the magic rock still in her hand and her expression carrying the specific energy of a child who has woken up already in the middle of a thought. Daddy, she said, I've been thinking about Gerald. Good morning to you too. He needs a friend, Maya said. Not Geraldine. Geraldine is already there, a new friend, from outside. Gerald lives in a tide pool bug. He has the whole ocean nearby. But does he have someone who knows him? Maya asked, and looked at Leo with such earnest gravity that he had no reasonable response to offer. He pulled back the covers. Get in, 5 minutes. She climbed in and tucked herself against his side, with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who had been doing this for years because she had. Because after Rachel died, Leo had made the decision that the rule about Maya sleeping in her own bed could wait. That some rules were less important than being physically close to the person you loved when the world had just done its worst. The rule had eventually been reinstated mostly, but mornings were still negotiable, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said so out loud. Julian knew Gerald, Maya said from the vicinity of his shoulder. He named him. That's knowing someone, Maya said firmly. When you give something a name, you're saying you see it. She paused. Miss Patton told us that. Leo thought about that. About naming. About the way Clara had said Leo, not hey, or excuse me, but his actual name the first time she'd said it right there outside the restroom, with the palms casting shade, like she'd decided to know him before she had any particular reason to. Miss Patton is right, he said. She usually is. Maya was quiet for a moment. Then, are we going to see Julian again? I think so. And Clara? He looked at the ceiling. Yeah, Bug, I think so. Maya made a small satisfied sound, the sound of a person whose hypothesis has been confirmed. She tucked the magic rock under the pillow for safekeeping, presumably. and then put her hand in the middle of Leo's chest palm. Flat the way she sometimes did, and he put his hand over hers, and they lay there for a few minutes in the Sunday morning quiet. "Daddy," she said. "Yeah. Today can we make the waffles with the blueberries?" "We can do that." "And can I call Julian? Let's give him until at least 9 o'clock. "That's so long." "It's an hour." "That's so long," Maya repeated with the absolute conviction of someone for whom an hour is a significant portion of lived experience. Leo smiled at the ceiling. "1 hour, Maya." She sighed with the dramatic resignation of someone accepting a geologically long sentence. Then, "Daddy." "Yeah. You seem different." He turned his head to look at her. She was looking back at him with the matter-of-fact perceptiveness that still regularly caught him off guard, those dark eyes that had been reading him since before she had words for what she was reading. "Different how?" he asked. She thought about it seriously. "Like when a window is open," she said. "The room sounds different." Leo was quiet for a moment. "Good different?" he asked. "Yeah," she said simply. "Good different." He pulled her in slightly closer. She allowed it with the patient tolerance of a child who understood that sometimes adults needed this, and it was fine to let them have it. He called his sister at 10, which was the Sunday call time they'd maintained for 3 years, through Rachel's illness and death and everything after the one constant on the calendar that Leo had protected, even in his worst weeks. Because Claire's voice was one of the remaining things that reminded him who he'd been before. Grief had narrowed his sense of himself down to architect, single father, functional fine. "Okay," Claire said before he'd finished saying hello. "Talk. Good morning to you." "Leo Thomas Callahan. I have been waiting since 11 p.m. last night. Talk." He leaned back in his kitchen chair, coffee in hand. Real coffee, the good kind he only made on Sundays, and told her. All of it. The wrong bathroom. Maya's emergency. The woman with the calm smile who said, "Let me help you." Gerald the crab. The afternoon that unfolded without a plan. The conversation on the blanket that had somehow covered more genuine ground in 4 hours than Leo had covered with anyone in 14 months. Claire was quiet through most of it, which was unusual for Claire. He could hear her breathing, and occasionally the sound of her own coffee cup. When he finished, she said, "Leo." "I know." "You left your phone on the blanket." "I know." "You told Dennis Monday. At 8 sharp. You laughed on the beach. Multiple times." "Oh my God." Her voice was doing something complicated. "Oh my God, Leo, Claire, I'm not crying," she said in the voice of someone crying. It's dusty here, in Portland. It's very..." She cleared her throat. "Okay, I'm fine. Tell me about her." So he did. He told Claire about Clara the way you tell someone about a person when you haven't figured out yet what they are to you, but you know there's something carefully precisely trying to get every detail accurate because somehow accuracy felt important. The way she'd crouched down to Maya's level, the way she listened. The things she'd said about competence as armor, and the coffee she'd handed him without asking, and the laugh that was real, and the way she'd said, "You're welcome," when he thanked her for treating him like a person. "She sounds," Claire said when he finished, "like someone who has done a lot of hard work on herself." "She has," Leo said. "You can tell. Not in a she's not performing it. It's just in her." "And Maya liked her." Maya held her hand within about 4 minutes of meeting her. "Leo," Claire paused. "Maya hasn't held anyone's hand." "I know." "Not since the Hendersons moved and she lost her preschool friend last year. She hasn't. She holds your hand, that's it." "I know," Leo said quietly. "So your daughter, who reads people the same way you do, but without the 12 layers of self-protection, decided in 4 minutes." Claire. "I'm just noting that as data." "I see what you're doing." "I'm doing nothing," Claire said in the tone of someone doing something. "I'm just saying. Maya is very accurate." Leo looked out the kitchen window. Maya was in the backyard, having declared that she needed to check on something in the garden, which meant she was going to talk to the tomato plants the way she always did, a practice Leo had stopped questioning around the third week of June. He could see her through the glass crouched over the small planter box he'd built for her last spring, conducting what appeared to be a detailed status report with a Roma tomato. "I'm scared," he said, not to Maya, to Claire. Out loud in a kitchen on a Sunday morning. The word landing clean. "Of course you are," Claire said, not dismissively, with the particular gentleness of a sister who has been waiting a long time to hear her brother say something true. "I don't know how to do this. Whatever this is. I was married for 11 years, and before that I was young, and I didn't know what I was doing then either, and now I'm 35 with a 5-year-old, and I meet someone at the beach, and I feel like—" He stopped. "I feel like a person again, and that's terrifying, because feeling like a person means there's something to lose again." "Yes?" Claire said. "That's your advice?" "Yes. Leo, there has always been something to lose. Maya's right there. You love her more than you've ever loved anything. That's terrifying every single day." She paused. "But you get in the car. You take her to the beach. You open the door." A beat. Even the wrong one. Leo pressed his free hand flat against the kitchen table. "When did you get wise?" he said. "I've always been wise. You've been too efficient to notice." He almost smiled. Did smile. "I'm going to text her today." "Good. I don't know what to say." "Leo," Claire said patiently, "you just talked to me for 40 minutes about a woman you met yesterday. You have things to say." Send. He texted Clara at 2 in the afternoon. Not a long text, not a calculated one. He typed it in 30 seconds and sent it before the system could weigh in. Maya would like Julian to have a standing invitation to visit Gerald. She also wants to know if he'd like to see the Seahorse Castle. "I would like to buy you a coffee that's better than the beach stand version. Not as a system, just as an ask." He set the phone down, picked it up, set it down again. Her reply came 7 minutes later. Julian has already named a page in his notebook, Gerald Ongoing Research. He says the castle is of scientific interest. "And I would like that coffee, Leo. Very much." Then a minute after Maya was right by the way, he frowned. "About what?" "You can visit a tide pool. Julian and I went this morning. Gerald was there. I think he remembered us." Leo read that 3 times. Then he typed, "She's going to be insufferable about this. So is Julian. They're going to be unbearable together. Is that a problem?" 3 dots. Then, "No. I don't think it is." Leo put the phone down on the table, face up. Maya came through the back door trailing garden dirt and a level of satisfaction that suggested the tomato plants had received good news. She climbed into the chair across from him and put her elbows on the table. "The tomatoes are fine," she announced. "I checked. Good to know." "Gerald is probably fine too," she said. Clara and Julian went to check. Maya's face went through about 4 expressions in quick succession: surprise, vindication, deep satisfaction, and then the careful neutrality of someone trying not to be too visibly smug. "I told you you could visit a tide pool," she said. "You were right." "I usually am." She examined her dirty fingernails. "Did Clara say when what? When we're going to see them?" Leo looked at his daughter at those eyes that read everything, at the hand still slightly curled from the morning habit of holding the rock at the face that was so much her mother's and so entirely her own. "Soon," he said. "How soon?" "Soon enough." Maya considered this negotiating position. Then she nodded once with the measured acceptance of a person who understands that some things take the time they take. "Okay," she said. "But Daddy—" "Yeah, next time, maybe check the sign on the door first." Leo looked at his daughter. His daughter looked at him with her mother's eyes and her own perfect, terrible comedic timing. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe." And Leo Callahan, who had carried everything alone for 2 years, who had weaponized competence and kept every lid tight and answered every email, and been so relentlessly fine that he'd forgotten what the alternative felt like sat at his kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon, with dirty-handed Maya across from him, and Clara Hess in his phone, and Gerald the crab, still technically alive in a tide pool down the coast, and felt the specific, unfamiliar, absolutely terrifying lightness of a man who has finally, without quite meaning to, let something in. Not through the door he'd planned on, through the wrong one, the one that was exactly right.